This was probably a mistake, but it seemed like a good idea under the influence of a couple of beers. The topic here is a little provocative, but open network OSs, what's our deal here? This presentation is 25% grenade rolling, 25% penance for sins I've committed over my career, and 50% a bit of a rhetorical playground for us to maybe mull some stuff over. This is not a technical lightning talk. This, as I mentioned, is a little bit of beer musing and discussions that I've had with my customers over the years about some things that we see in the vendor community, some things that we see in the OS community, etc. I will point out, I'm writing this down for posterity, this might be a mistake, and the mea culpa here is that I have totally argued the other side of this for previous employers. So my hot take here is that we aren't, as the networking industry, leaning into the open network operating system problem hard enough. I went back and I looked at the data that Elizabeth Cully was referencing in the previous panel discussion about some of the topics that we've been bandying about at NANOG over the years. And I found a fairly limited corpus of discussion around open network operating systems as a topic. We had 2 SONiC-specific presentations, and depending on how you want to count or interpret this, 1 to 3 presentations on white boxes. I went and kind of harvested the ripe apricot discussions, history. They seem to be similarly constrained. Now, one of the puzzling things here is that our peers over in the compute and the system side of things have been realizing, a pretty significant pace of innovation and gaining leverages by using, Linux or, their open OSs of choice. And, we all seem to have a Linux substrate running underneath the hood on our vendor systems, but we don't seem to be taking pervasive advantage of open OSs, kind of broadly. The notable exception here is hyperscalers and the folks who do, seem to want to, kind of experiment in the SONiC and ONL space. To that point, I will point out that pretty much all the major vendors have made significant noises in the SONiC space. This takes the form of varying degrees of durable engagement, and the support options there are pretty opaque. I think if you ask anybody about this, they're going to point you at your account team and encourage you to have a real heart-to-heart there on that front. This conversation typically comes with a host of what I call yeah buts. The first yeah but being, hey, networking is a special thing. This is most commonly asserted by network equipment vendors, SDOs, some operators, and certainly the certification industry. The other point here is that this is really only interesting to the hyperscalers. Again, largely asserted by network equipment vendors, enterprises, and what I would call generously the podcasting class. No offense, Scott Robin. I want to hit that first yeah, but networking special here. I would say, yeah, but networking hardware and ASICs they can be pretty special, but by and large, I would posit that the majority of your features aren't that special, and that when you go back and look at the commonality of feature execution across deployed networks, there's a huge overlapping Venn diagram. Also, we happen to be sitting at a point in time when fixed pipeline ASICs are pretty readily capable of supporting a pretty broad range of features and deployment profiles. Dominantly, this seems to be something that is in the DC space. We do see adaptations taking place in the in the campus environment. A notable outlier here that kind of promulgates this notion of networking being special is DFZ capable hardware platforms. And I would encourage you all to look a little more deeply at that because there is code out there to support DFZ capable hardware platforms. Optics, commonly tossed out as special case stuff. They start out special. Getting optics to work, especially with exotic PMDs, is a pretty daunting task for everybody. Over time, we get pretty good at it pretty fast, and optics get commodified pretty aggressively. Vendors, they do trick features with the available ASICs, but we lack, excepting, in the case of SI, open interfaces to be able to tickle these features outside of our, vendor OSs. There are a host of folks who do funky things with novel tunnel end caps and encryption. These things don't necessarily lend themselves well to easy exposure from a ASIC pipeline exploitation perspective. If we want to be able to realize some of these gains and to be able to open up some of this stuff and peek inside and do stuff ourselves with this, we might do ourselves a favor and avoid these if possible. It's for the hyperscalers. I would say it's not just for the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers' problems are your problems too. They just manifest themselves on different timescales or scales, broadly. We have a lot of instances where vendors are driving R&D spend on stuff that's non-differentiating, and this is driving fragmentation of management systems. I think there are good efforts in terms of wrapping stuff around that. I will kind of mumble about OpenConfig and the work that's being done inside of the IETF on this space. I would also point out that as this kind of fragments and suffers from versioning issues, we see further fragmentation there. Proprietary OSs, though, at the end of the day, are subject to our vendors' lifecycle whims. This invariably leads to stranded investment, and us either in the vendor space being continuously asked for extended lifecycle support, or operators begging, pleading, using whatever leverage is at their disposal in order to realize extended lifecycle support. If you are not necessarily always on the bleeding edge of I/O, you're not on that I/O hamster wheel of 100 gig to 400 gig to 800 gig to 1.6T on the I/O side of things, you are going to observe, and you have probably started to observe this already, that there is a significant bifurcation in the available ASIC space around what is available for low speeds and for the high speeds. And that means that we are also starting to see a fairly long tail of support requirements for low speed stuff. And then the last point here is, I think we've all observed consolidation in the vendor space and supplier consolidation. If I might glibly quote Darth Vader, I have altered the deal, pray don't alter it any further. I think we've all had these conversations in discussions with our vendors, our suppliers for whatever the topic might be. I'm going to assert that OpenNAS introduction on many of our legacy platforms is simply unrealistic. The horse is out of the barn, if I might use that phrase. The commercial pressures, the leverage is gone. If you have certain classes of DC hardware, you might be in a spot where you could draw the lifecycle discussion out a little bit further and look at actually embracing OSs that are open. I would also point out that the incentives and the leverages in this space are largely concentrated right now in a handful of operators. And these operators tend to drive the priorities. If you don't see your priorities reflected here in the development spaces here, you might want to ask your vendors what's going on here. To reiterate, novel hardware interfaces do remain problematic, but that's increasingly less so. Vendors see less utility in doing special stuff to make LEDs blink appropriately. There's a lot of diversity in the bootloader domain, which is to say nothing about enabling things like trusted computing functionality in the boot space, or kind of making sure that we can trust the hardware that we're running on. And basically, this presentation is a nudge to encourage folks to start thinking about this, and to start doing what they can internally and externally to encourage and create this opportunity for themselves. I'm running out of time here. I will point out the usual capitalist realities here, but I would point out that one thing that has historically hamstrung this is the notion of supported open source software being expected to be free. I would assert that it shouldn't be expected to be free. We have a lot of folks depending on the good graces of developers, and vendors are dependent upon this to some extent. There are some pointed things that maybe we should be looking at from an industry perspective in terms of what we have at our disposal. In short, if you're not making this a thing, it won't be a thing. This is a point for just kind of reminding operators and vendors that we need to look at this kind of collaboratively. I'm kind of out of time here. I want to invite Israel up here. I'd leave you on this note. We are, as a program committee, very interested in topics along this line. If you as an operator have some opinions and takes and experience here, we'd certainly be open to that. There's a whole range of perspectives to take on this. Encourage you to think about it and submit content. The same holds true for suppliers and vendors.